Time has a way of moving forward even when you're not ready for it. Before I realized it, years had passed, and the boy who once slept on park benches had become a man who could stand on his own. I had a career I was proud of, stability I had fought tooth and nail to create, and a partner I believed was my home. The one thing I had avoided all this time was returning to the place where it all began. My hometown had always been a wound I refused to reopen. But something inside me wanted closure, wanted to face the people who had thrown me out and show them that I wasn't the broken child they discarded. I wanted them to see the man they tried to erase, standing taller than they ever imagined. When I finally made the decision to go back, it wasn't about seeking forgiveness. I had no illusions that they had changed or that time had softened their hearts. It was about reclaiming my own story. For too long, their rejection had defined me. Stepping into that house again would be my way of proving, to them and to myself, that I was no longer their victim. The day I returned, everything about me was different. I carried myself with confidence, dressed in the success I had earned, standing beside the person I had built a life with. Walking through the door, I saw their shock painted across their faces. My father's eyes widened in disbelief. My mother froze as if she'd seen a ghost, and my siblings shifted uneasily, caught between curiosity and discomfort. For years, they had probably told themselves I had disappeared, maybe even convinced themselves I had failed. But there I was, alive, thriving, and unapologetically myself. At first, the reunion was laced with false pleasantries. My mother forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My father tried to act as though nothing had happened, asking stiff questions about work, about life, avoiding the reality of what he had done. My siblings were more honest in their discomfort, stealing glances at me as though I was some stranger who didn't quite belong. The tension was thick, every word weighed down by years of silence. Then I introduced the man standing beside me, my partner, the person who had carried me through the darkest parts of my healing, the one who made me believe in love again. Their reactions were mixed, awkward, guarded, unwilling to acknowledge what was obvious. But even with the forced civility, I felt a flicker of pride in standing there, not hiding who I was. It should have ended there, a strained reunion, a quiet dinner, a departure that left the past where it belonged. But life doesn't work so neatly, because buried beneath the awkward smiles and surface-level questions was a secret that would unravel everything I thought I knew. My partner, the person I trusted more than anyone, wasn't who I believed he was. And soon I would discover that his betrayal was tied to the very family who had cast me aside. The years after leaving were nothing short of a battlefield, but I refused to lose. At first, every day felt like survival, finding a couch to crash on, scraping together food, taking whatever odd jobs I could. But slowly, determination turned into opportunity. I discovered programs for homeless youth, mentors who believed in me when no one else did. I threw myself into school, clinging to it as if it were my lifeline. Late nights in the library, early mornings juggling part-time work, every ounce of energy I had went into proving I could be more than the broken kid they had thrown out. College came as a miracle. Scholarships, grants, and relentless effort carried me there. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was building something. I walked onto campus with nothing but a duffel bag and an ache in my chest, but I walked with purpose. And it was there that I met him. He wasn't flashy or loud. He didn't come into my life like a whirlwind. He came like sunlight breaking through clouds. He asked me questions no one else cared about. He listened without judgment. He saw the parts of me that were still raw, still scarred, and instead of recoiling, he stayed. Our friendship began in quiet conversations and long study sessions, but before long it became something more. For the first time, I felt what it was like to love without fear. Every touch, every smile, every laugh with him reminded me that I wasn't broken. He made me believe that despite my past, I could have a future filled with love. We built routines together, shared secrets in the dead of night, and made promises under the stars. With him, I didn't need to hide, didn't need to shrink myself to fit someone else's expectations. He looked at me like I was enough, exactly as I was. Still, I carried the weight of my past like a shadow. Some nights I would wake in a cold sweat, haunted by the memory of being shoved out of my home, the echo of my father's voice telling me I wasn't welcome. I never told him all of it at once. Instead, I revealed it in fragments, as if testing whether he would stay when he saw the whole of me. Each time, he didn't run. He pulled me closer. Years passed, and together we carved out a life. We talked about the future not as a dream, but as a plan. Where we'd live, what we'd build, how we'd stand side by side no matter what. For someone who once had nothing, the thought of a shared future felt almost unreal. Yet, with him, it seemed possible. I thought I had finally outrun the ghosts of my past. I thought I had escaped the cold rejection of my family and replaced it with warmth, trust, and love. What I didn't know was that life has a cruel way of circling back, that sometimes the very happiness you cling to hides the sharpest blade. I grew up in a house where silence was louder than words, and judgment hung in the air like a storm cloud. My parents believed in control, in strictness, in rules that were carved into stone. Smiling was allowed, but only when it fit their image. Crying was weakness. And being different, that was an unforgivable sin. I knew from a young age that something about me didn't fit the mold they wanted. I wasn't like my brother, who played football and talked about girls with the same rough laughter my father admired. I wasn't like my sister either, who dressed the way my mother dictated and pretended not to have thoughts of her own. I was just me. Soft around the edges, drawn to music, drawn to emotions, drawn to the truth inside myself that I couldn't ignore. When I was 14, I decided to stop hiding it. I had carried it inside me long enough, whispering it to myself at night like a secret I was afraid of, but also proud of. I was gay. Saying it out loud should have felt freeing. Instead, it was the beginning of the end. My father's face hardened like stone, my mother's lips curled with disgust, and in that moment I was no longer their child. I was their shame. There were no long arguments, no tearful embraces. There was only a short, sharp sentence from my father. "Pack your things, you're done here." I remember standing in my small bedroom, staring at the walls I had decorated with little scraps of myself, drawings, song lyrics scribbled on paper, tiny pieces of hope I had kept hidden. I stuffed clothes into a bag, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip it shut. I kept looking at the door, half expecting my mother to come in and stop me, to say she didn't mean it, that love was stronger than disappointment. But she never came. The only sound was my father's footsteps pacing the hallway, making sure I was leaving. When I finally stepped outside with nothing but a bag on my back, the world felt too big, too cold, too cruel. That first night, I sat on a park bench under a flickering streetlight and tried to convince myself I wasn't terrified. I told myself it was freedom, not abandonment. I told myself I was strong, not broken. But when the wind cut through my jacket and the reality sank in that I had nowhere to go, I felt something I had never felt before. Completely disposable. The weeks that followed were a blur of desperation. Sometimes a friend would sneak me into their basement for a night. Sometimes I wandered until dawn just to stay awake, too afraid of what might happen if I closed my eyes on the streets. I learned how quickly hunger could gnaw at you, how humiliation tasted when you had to ask strangers for help. And yet, through all of it, there was a tiny flame inside me that refused to go out. I whispered to myself over and over that this wasn't the end. One day, I would make something of myself. One day, I would walk back into that house not as a discarded child, but as someone they could never ignore again. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I knew that if I survived this, I would come back stronger. And when I did, it wouldn't be for them, it would be for me.